Hi, I'm Amber, and welcome to the Lone Star Keto podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Dave Wolfe. He is a food addiction expert and a sugar addiction coach. He is also the co-founder of SUGARx Global, and he's a recovering food addict, as am I. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
My
Okay,
pleasure.
let's start off with your background. You have an incredibly interesting background. Tell us about that. Tell us about your journey with addiction and where you got to where you are right now, doing so much in the community, dealing with food addiction.
Yeah, so I had no idea this was a thing for me um, until probably, let's see, maybe 10 years ago. So it's always been present, though. In hindsight, I see it. I would come home from school and I would just run downstairs like in a parka and gloves on, and I like eat 5 packs of like gummy snacks, and I like hide the wrappers, and um, you know, I didn't really have an explanation for that. Um, my mom entered into recovery. I mean, for as long as I can remember, my mom's been in recovery, not always clean, but working on it. So that was definitely part of my upbringing. Um, and so I grew up around that. Like I remember she happens to be in, through a 12-step model of recovery. So I would remember like the phone calls with people in recovery. I remember working on that kind of stuff, going to meetings. That was just like a big part of like sort of my social norm as a kid. And then I was always pretty thin. I was put on amphetamines for ADHD when I was like in the first grade, and I was on those for 25 years. So my appetite was really suppressed for a long time. And so I don't think my addiction really took off in regards to some of those symptoms like weight or cravings, because I was drugged all the time. So then more recently, I've come off those medications in the last, so I really stopped when my daughter Willow was born. She's almost 3 now, so it'll be almost 3 years off of meds. And that was definitely a process. And Bitten Johnson was a big part of helping me to kind of reacclimate to life. And so that was a big part of my story. I don't know. I never fit in as a kid, even when I should have. I didn't feel like I did. So, that kind of speaks to kind of the addict mindset, the addict brain, isolation, alienation, kind of all that stuff. And just like what I call the ism, which is really the manifestation of the disease. Whether I'm in the food or not, I have a brain that I have to treat, and I have to treat it, every day. So I think just kind of feeling out of place, not feeling right, always feeling like I had the world on my shoulders. And I think that led me ultimately to need to find a way out. And I realized as a kid that I could do that with certain foods. And then I actually really honestly didn't realize I was actually an addict until I was actually already working professionally helping other addicts. So it kind of shows you the
Wow.
level of denial that we can face and have to face. And I think that even if you think you're not in denial anymore, you'll find new ways and new behaviors that you act out on. So I went to a program. I was already a dietitian. I was working at a bariatric center in Boston. Um, I went to a program called INFACT, which is the International Food Addiction Counselor Training Program. It's run by my friend Esther Helga. She's out of Iceland. And so I went to this training, and as part of the training, she did like a one-on-one, like a 30-minute call, just to kind of see where you were at and why you were doing the course. And she had me fill out some questions, and she said, "Dave, I think you're an early stage food addict." And I had no defense. My mom's a food addict. My sister's a food addict. I come from a long, like if you shake my family tree, a bunch of addicts just fall out. Like that's just the reality. So
Mhm.
it wasn't a surprise to me. And so I just said, yeah, you're probably right. So that kind of was the start of my own personal recovery journey. And by that point, I was already helping was in a bariatric center. So I think a lot of people that end up in bariatric centers are probably food addicts. So I was using a lot of the sort of the treatment models that we use for addicts for these patients, but I had no idea like the level of my disease at that time. And so that sort of started my journey. And then I went through Esther Helga's program. I got connected with Bitten Johnson. We had to pick a mentor. I chose her. So we've been working on one-on-one on and off for like 5 years.
Wow.
And yeah, so now that's kind of brings me up to speed to today. I've left the Western medicine practice of reducing harm, and now I just work with addicts full time. We follow an abstinence-based model where our job is to repair your brain. Every day we run groups and things like that. So that kind of brings me up to speed on a really quick version of my story from being a lost little kid to finding out that I'm an addict while I'm already helping addicts, and then starting my own journey. And so that brings us up more or less to today.
Okay. So are you still technically a registered dietitian, or did you literally like just?
I'm technically still registered.
Okay.
Though I don't, when I work with addicts, I'm not practicing really through that license.
Okay.
Because it's, well, technically, food addiction doesn't exist according to the powers that be. So right, I can't diagnose you with it. There's not a coding I can use to bill insurance, so I don't really work through that framework.
That was actually my next question and kind of where I was going with that.
Sure.
So is food addiction real? I mean, Dave, come on.
I have it. I mean, it's real in me.
Right?
Yeah. So I think when I use a lot of what I would call hard substance language, like drug addiction language, alcoholism language, because I think it should be used in the framework of food addiction as well. So, I use terminology like dope sick, withdrawal, so I just feel like, because that's really what I was dealing with, and that's what my clients deal with. The members of our community, they deal with it too, right? So is it real? To me, it's indisputable. It's not something I believe in, because I think belief implies that there is an evidence for, right? So there is evidence that sugar changes your brain. You can look at an fMRI scan and you can see it looks a lot like what happens to the brain when cocaine is used, right? Or when alcohol is used, or when opiates are used. It lights up like the Rockefeller Christmas tree. That center of the brain becomes damaged and receives a lot less electricity, so to speak, magnetism in the fMRI. So it's, to me, absolutely, it exists. It's real. Why has it become so difficult for it to be claimed as a diagnosis and to be treated is, I think, where the money lies. I think that's a big part of it. If you look at the food industry and things like that, it's all tied in with that. It's tied in with our agricultural system. It's tied in with everything. So we have to kind of break down some of these barriers. And I feel like a lot of the reason why these barriers are in place are to protect big business. And so it becomes a conflict of interest. As we make advancements in the sugar addiction world, there are a lot of people that have a lot to lose by us kind of getting the truth out there. And so I think it makes it difficult.
Yeah, very much so. And that was going to be my next question too.
And the other thing is the sugar, which I know you know about, and I know you had Bitten Johnson on your show before the holidays. So that's her jam. And so we do have a tool that can tell us, am I an addict or am I not an addict? And it's based on the criteria for drug addiction and alcohol addiction. It's just that we've switched it a bit to kind of fit into the food vernacular. But the symptoms are all the same.
I totally agree. And I was kind of in a similar situation as you. Bitten, we connected through the Quit Sugar Summit, and she was like, let me do sugar on you. I think this is something that would really interest you. And I was like, yeah, heck yeah, let's do it. And after I saw my results, I was like, holy crap. I really am a sugar addict. Oh my God. And I think I always knew it in my head, but because you have all that noise that you just talked about, that, oh, it's not real, it's just willpower, you're just too weak or whatever. When I know darn good and well, willpower has never been my issue. But yet, time and time again, after I met my goal, I would, go back to doing what I was doing because I couldn't maintain it. And, that really opened my eyes. And that is an amazing tool. Y'all, it's called Sugar, and it is a diagnostic tool. And it incorporates various things that is so detailed that it's just kind of mind boggling when you actually see it for yourself.
It kills denial. I mean, it just kills
Yeah,
denial. It's just like,
it did.
Oh shoot. Yeah. So I think it's a really powerful tool. And we actually include it when we do one of our programs, our sort of in-depth program. It's included because we feel like it's so valuable for the end user to get those reports, to see it on paper. And I always tell people, like, you're going on a trip, you think your recovery is in question, take it with you, put that in your suitcase, because nothing's going to remind you like those graphs, but like where you're at really, and how addicted you really are. It's really actually funny. I haven't done a sugar. I haven't. I was just speaking with one of our community members who's also in HMA, the program with Bitten Johnson, and I was telling her that. She's like, "Oh, I'm a student. I have to do one. Let me do one on you." So I'm gonna get my sugar done.
So. Lucky. I would have I shouldn't say this, done you. That sounds really bad. But I would have loved to have had you do sugar. How fun to see that. I mean, not fun, but you know what I mean. Interesting.
I get it. The truth is, it's good. We need it. So
yeah, definitely. I've learned a lot using that tool. And I want to just tell you kind of about a situation and you having the background as a dietitian and the food addiction. I just want to tell you this story and get your take on it. Okay, my very first client, as Bitten said, "Oh, girl, you picked one for your first client," and she just had all kinds of different things going on. Anyway, she sent herself to a treatment center, okay, for a eating disorder, bulimia. Okay, and I was already working with her on the sugar addiction part. Well, what she was really wanting out of that was the therapy part. And when she first went in, she vetted all these different treatment centers and said, look, I am on the carnivore diet. There's a specific reason for it. It has nothing to do with my eating disorder. I have been diagnosed as a sugar addict, and that's the best way for me to remove all the foods that cause me issues. Is there going to be a problem with me being on that specific diet? And they assured her, no. She asked them multiple times. Now, granted, this is the office people, I'm assuming, versus the actual workers, the dietitians, the therapists, etc. And so when she got in, oh no, that was not okay. They wanted her to eat every food, including Oreos and desserts and all that, because nothing should be limited ever, because that is, bad for the eating disorder, right? And she was like, no, you don't understand. That is going to be bad for me. I can't heal. I can't do what I need to do and function when I'm under the drug, right? Sure. And they were like, well, can you just like maybe add honey to milk? And she's like, why would I do that? Why? Just for the fact of trying to prove that I'll eat dessert? What is your take on that? I mean, that blew my mind, because I don't care who you are. Oreos aren't good for anybody. How can that be good for healing the brain, whether you have an eating disorder, absence of food addiction or not? What is your take?
My take is that addicts are not designed for eating disorder treatment centers, right? The treatment is totally different.
Yes.
And it's a problem. It really is a problem. And they're drawing, I think, largely from the information that they have, and they've eliminated maybe some more modern recent. I mean, low carb Boca. Michelle Hearn was talking about basically low carb for anorexia. You know what I mean? Like So there's some new things that are coming out that I think are going to be really helpful in the treatment space till I don't know how long it's going to take till they start getting
20
applied
years.
Yeah, maybe more. But it's very problematic. And I think that the story that you're telling me it's not a new story. It's a really old story. And I think that doctors and whatever, they end up using their, I don't want to say authority, but their authority of knowledge. And I have clients that come to me and they're like, well, my last dietitian, or they're afraid to talk to me because they're like, my last dietitian recommended I eat saltines or, whatever. And I'm just like, oh my God, I would never do that in a million years. That is insanity. So I think it's a really big problem. And one of the things that Bitten says often, which is something that I heard once, and I use it all the time, is that moderation is the great mythical unicorn. Like the reality of someone like me being able to moderate is absolutely preposterous. I cannot moderate. I am not a moderator. No,
I agree.
I am an abuser. I'm an addict. So, and even when I can make anything sound like a good idea, like in my own head, like I can make it seem like, well, I'm in a treatment center and Bobby Sue and Billy Joe are eating an Oreo and they seem okay. Like I could be like, so, it makes sense that like in this setting, I should like be okay. Like, right. And time again, we're taught the same lesson over and over. Right. And until we start to act differently and live differently. And so it's a common problem and it's a conundrum, and it breaks my brain to even think. I don't know why toxic substances are allowed in treatment centers. But even you see it even in alcohol and drug treatment centers. Because I've done like outreach work for things like that, and you walk in and they've got vending machines in their lounges filled with all sorts of garbage. I just don't think they understand the connection between food and the brain. Or I honestly, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they just don't know, because I think they don't know. But if they did, I don't know. It's the same problem with school lunch, right? It's cheap. It's cheap. Whether it's food or not, it's cheap. They don't really, and their budget restraints are absolutely ridiculous. Like they have like 35 cents to feed a kid lunch. So, and I understand that, but it's just simply not food.
No, it's really not. And I actually had the dietitian contact me. I think she was trying to get me to agree with her and, change my mind because apparently I didn't know what I was talking about. And,
Sure.
she was basically telling me food addiction does not exist. It is not, thought of as that. And there's all this research proving it's not. And she's, sent a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't understand. If you give her or you have her eat those cookies or the whatever junk, you don't know what you're doing to her.
Right.
I've worked with her. I know her. I mean,
Right.
I get her addiction. I was a bulimic. I get it. I understand the eating disorder world. I do. And I'm like, this is not, no. And we just went round and round. Anyway, they ended up discharging her. And we make a joke about it that she got discharged because she wouldn't eat an Oreo.
Yeah, she got kicked out for non-compliance. I think it's really sad. I think the other piece, is, God, my thought just left my mind. It's just troubling.
It really is
troubling that, and she's probably like, bless your heart, you don't understand. And you're like, you are saying the same thing because you just live in totally different worlds.
Yeah.
And I think the more information we know about food, the harder it is for us to actually run studies because they're actually causing harm. So we can't like actually study this. And it's just like, it's very hard to do studies on women that are pregnant because it's just, well,
it's unethical.
What will happen? Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. And I don't know. That's a hard word to swallow when it comes to like the treatment modalities in the eating disorder world. And I tell people, like, I remember what it was. if you listen to Bitten Johnson talk about food addiction, and over the kind of the course of the person developing food addiction, they do practice behaviors that many would consider eating disorders, right?
Yes.
Bulimia, restriction, binging, right? They're not the disease. They're just symptoms of the disease of addiction, right? So, and then I think people end up, yeah, absolutely. It's everybody. I mean, you know, it's me too. And I'm like what you call high bottom. Like my life didn't get that bad for me to get recovery, like to do the work. It was like I lost a job. I didn't know what to do with my life. Yeah. I'm very, very, very fortunate. I'm very high bottom, and people helped raise my bottom up and help me become willing to do the actions that I needed to take to stay in recovery. But the reality is that's not true for most people. And they go through this trajectory of all sorts of different eating disorders, but they're not really eating disorders. They're just methods for us to manage our addiction. Like the reason why we restricted so much, it wasn't because we had anorexia. Not at all. We were just trying to control some of the symptoms of the disease of addiction. Same thing with bulimia, same thing with binging. It was an attempt to solve the problem. It wasn't the problem itself.
Amen. And that is exactly what I did. Exactly. I went through thing after thing, you know, it was anorexia, then it was bulimia, then it was anorexia athletica and orthorexia, whatever. I mean, I probably had just pretty much every one out there. I probably had it at one point or another as I kind of went through. And now it's so clear in my head. Now that I understand, it's so clear. It was the addiction, the food addiction. And it's just kind of, yeah.
We say primary, progressive, fatal. Yeah. Primary came first. Progressive is going to get worse, and it'll kill you.
Talk about that, because I know when I first heard Bitten say that, y'all need to follow Bitten Johnson. I'm going to just tell you she's awesome. Anyway, but she very much talks about that in the sense that, and I forgot where I was going with that. Dang it.
It came first.
Yeah. Oh, about the fatal part. Yeah. Duh. Where when she first said that, I was like, fatal food addiction, fatal food addiction, what? But I didn't really fully understand that it does progress through. And then, you know, you either, you get that, obesity going, and then you have all the other issues that come along with it, or your health, even if you're not obese, suffers. And then if it keeps going, it can end in death, like heart attack or, diabetes complications. And talk a little bit about that, how food addiction ultimately can lead to your death.
Yeah. So I mean, addiction is insidious. So I use a lot of kind of like imagery or analogies. So if you have a circus and, you have a baby elephant and you stake the elephant down, right, to keep it in one place, like rope around its neck, it's pinned to the ground, right? And so it grows up its whole life that way. And eventually it becomes a full-blown adult elephant. The elephant could knock over the circus if it wanted to, but it's conditioned that it's pinned down and it can't do anything about it. I think that's ultimately what happens with disease of addiction. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And it does it in such a gradual, insidious way that you can't really do anything about it until you're imprisoned by it, right? And so it's insidious. It increases in harm without us noticing. And I think what cuts through that is the sugar, and you look back at your life and you see all the symptoms. You're like, oh my God, and I mean, I think you mentioned a lot of it, the metabolic complications of, like, a lot of people look at diabetes like it's a disease. They look at atherosclerosis or high blood pressure, hypertension, whatever. They're diseases. To me, they're not diseases. They're symptoms. They're symptoms of the root cause, which at least in my case was addiction. So all of these things, when I treat the disease of addiction, disappear, right? I can reverse diabetes. Granted, I'm talking about type 2. I'm not talking about type 1.
Yeah, please put that in there.
Yeah, I don't want to tee anyone off, right?
So, yeah, I'm saying.
So I think that they're reversible. if I treat the right thing. But if I just treat my diabetes and I don't treat my addiction, then it's going to come out some other whack-a-mole. It's going to come out through some other hole. All those things could kill me, right? Hypertension is the silent killer. Diabetes, you could lose my limbs. I could lose my eyesight. My kidneys could fail. I could end up on dialysis. There's a number. I mean, there's choose your own adventure, way to death, so to speak. But I think that it goes back to the primary illness. If I treat my primary illness, the secondary illnesses disappear. They go away. They can't survive. And so part of that is, we talk about the food, but really it's about, I think, repairing the brain so we can live a life that doesn't require food. Like we need to eat, but it doesn't require food to change the way I feel. Right. So it's not that I don't eat sugar. It's that I live a certain way that enables me to not have to eat sugar.
Oh yeah. I like the way you said that.
So it's it's like a mindset switch, but I think it is fatal and not just physical life. I don't just mean mortality, but like emotional death, spiritual death, like when I'm in the food, I'm disconnected. Like I can't be a dad. Certainly not a good one. Certainly not present for my kids, certainly not present for my partner. I'm unreliable. I'm late. Like I'm not living. I might be in a living body, but like life is not an enjoyable thing. It's just, I'm going from drug to drug to drug to drug to try to change the way I think or I feel. And it's a terrible way to live. So even if we're not, like, I'm a thin addict, right? So like a lot of them, I probably had metabolic consequences, but they weren't obvious to you or to someone else looking at me because I was in a normal sized body, but I was still living in a crazy way.
And I think that's kind of a false perception where people, like, they only think obese people are food addicts, that if you're thin, well, obviously you're not. That's false, because you can be in any body and be a food addict. You don't have to be obese. Now, granted, a good majority of those who are obese probably do have food addiction, but just because you're thin doesn't mean you don't have it.
Sure. My friend Phil Wardell, he says, if you focus on your weight, you'll lose your abstinence, your recovery, and if you focus on your recovery, you'll lose the weight. So I think it's a matter of putting the cart in front of the horse. Like Pitt says that all the time.
I was going to say.
She's always talking about the horse and the cart, and so it's so hard to convince someone of that, though. And to be honest, the hardest addicts to work with, food addicts I'm talking about, are either thin or wicked grain addicted. The fog is just, it's worse than sugar. It's like worse than, like, as a clinician or a coach trying to work with someone in like fulminant brain fog, they're usually the thinner ones are harder, and the ones that are really hooked on grain and the opiate effect of the grains and it's crazy. So I may have looked normal, but my brain was not by any stretch of the imagination. And if you used the ICD-10 or the DSM criteria for classifying substance abuse, you'd be amazed at the percentage of the population that would meet criteria.
What are the percentages that you've heard? I've kind of seen some different things, but have you seen anything more definitive about the guesstimate of the percentage of population that would be considered a food addict?
I mean, I've seen, well, we know that a third of America is overweight and a third is obese. So if we take that, I mean, I would venture to actually, well, like, I think we have to differentiate between like clinically meeting criteria for substance abuse and what a lot of people perceive an addict is like. Right. So there's a big difference there where like a lot of people are picturing kind of the alcoholic under the bridge in a brown bag. And that's not how it is. Lots of these people have wonderful jobs, wonderful families. And it's just like everything in their life is going well, except for the fact that they're an addict. Like, and so I think that picture is really important to understand. So I would venture to guess that of the overweight and the obese population, I would say more than 85% would probably meet criteria for substance abuse. So what is, and then you also have thin people or I don't want to say thin people who don't meet criteria for overweight or obesity. And that I don't know, you could probably go anywhere with 40 to 60% would probably meet criteria. I think it's a massive number. The problem is that we're dealing with a criminal amount of denial. So yeah, there are a ton of food addicts out there and they could all really use help. They don't necessarily want help. Is that because they don't want to give up the drug or because they have no idea something's wrong? And the other
because
thing
everybody does it. I mean,
everybody does. And the other thing that drives me bonkers is that there are a lot of people in the health and wellness or low carb space or whatever, and they use the term addiction and they have no idea what it means. They think it means that I've people say something like that. People I respect, people that I have a lot of admiration for, say things like, well, I used to be addicted to sugar. And I always be like, used to ? Question mark. Like, what? Because I missed the boat on that one. So I think like that's a misnomer, and you have folks that use the word addiction, carb addiction, chocoholic, and they don't really understand the power of the word addiction. To me, and I've come to a place in my own recovery where it's not a handicap, it's more of an asset to me because I'm an addict. I mean, I'm driven. There's addicts are some of the most driven people I've ever met. Like if you can take 10% of what you use to chase a fix and you can chase your dreams with, I mean, you're going far, baby. There's just no two ways about it. Feel like my colleague, Anna, we call her Coach Anna. She talks about how like we were the people and primally that survived. We were like, let's go, Ralph. We need an antelope. And we go. We just like out of berries. Here we go. You know, like we're like the action takers. And so sometimes we're all action and no thought, but sometimes it's those people that are able to face their fears and survive. So I think it's an asset, and it's just a matter of how do we take this like terminal punishment and turn it into a gift. And I really think that's what recovery does. So I don't want to frame addiction like it's like this just terrible, awful, because really it's given my life so much meaning and so much purpose, even outside of my work, a sense of community, a need for community, belonging, meaning. So much of that is driven from the fact that, I mean, I'm an addict.
And like Bitten says,
it's a hard pill to swallow, though. I mean, that
it's a superpower, though, right?
I think it is. I mean, but who doesn't want one of those? You know, so it's definitely a gift.
When Bitten talks about it being a superpower and that we have sensitive brains, what does she mean by that? Like, describe what she's meaning by that for those who pretty much know they're food addicts. They just haven't really come to terms with it yet.
Think about like some sort of weather management system or something that measures air pressure or whatever. Like the more sensitive it is, the more able it can kind of capture nuance or small shifts or like if my mic is really high, you're going to hear like the moisture in my mouth. You're going to hear like all this stuff because it's so sensitive. So I think that we can process more information and not just verbal information, like reading a room, energy. Like most of the most talented people I know, like we're in our community, we're working through Russell Brand's book, and it's sort of his book Recovery is sort of his take on the 12 steps. And like here's a man who most people would probably classify as insane, right? But he has a gift, and the reason he was able to hone that gift was because he was in recovery. And so like if you read his, like they hit you on a gut level, and he's very gifted. I think it's because he's very sensitive brain. So and he's a controversial figure, and I know that, but his book is incredible. I think we just receive lots of info and we can process it, and whereas other people get overwhelmed by it.
I would be really curious to know how many empaths are actually addicts. That would be a really interesting thing.
I would say that most of the ones I know are. Yeah, I mean, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
So, but I that'd be interesting study. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
Because I'm an empath too. Like, I mean, I don't do
Me
anything
too.
with it, but like, it's like
Me
sometimes
too.
it's like, whoa, can we just turn this off for a minute? So yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And I've kind of started to accept it. Like before I was kind of denying it, like, whatever, that's no, whatever. And I would push whatever it was out because I was, loopy, whatever. But now I'm kind of like owning it and like, okay, I may not be one of them really, highly tuned ones, but I'm starting to kind of pull it together. So I think it's interesting.
I think we all have heard things that weren't said and felt things that weren't there. Or, I think that social norms, not to go on like this crazy tangent, but like social norms have made us feel that it wasn't okay to be able to have these gifts. Whereas my brother-in-law is like a world-renowned psychic medium. Like he's just like a regular guy. It's just like he's tuned into this thing. And I think we can all get premonitions and things like that. I mean, but it's totally another subject.
I know, right? But it's cool.
I think that we've ended up limiting our own selves by the way that we think. And so, as a person in recovery, I have to keep an open mind. Like my life depends on me being open to new ideas and concepts. So I think it's opened my mind to the idea of all sorts of these different things. And
me too.
Things that I wouldn't have even been remotely tuned into before recovery. Not to mention that I
just think it's cool though. All these different things that I used to think I called it woo-woo. It's like, whatever.
It's woozy. Yeah.
And now I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe. Okay. All right.
I was talking to my wife. Now, my wife is the psychic's sister. Okay. So she was saying like, I was getting a healing session from a friend of mine. Her name's Tracy, and she's trained in body code. And it's basically something with magnetic resonance, and they can like remove energy that's been trapped in your body, so to speak, for long periods of time. And she's like, I don't believe in that. I was like, well, how is that different than, like a psychic or
right?
And she's like, oh, I guess you're right. So I think we all have these like paradigms that things can't exist as fact in, but it's really just the paradigm that's broken. It's our way of thinking about it that's broken. And I think that applies to addiction recovery, right? It applies to all sorts of different things.
Absolutely.
Open-mindedness, that's huge.
I agree. And that's something I've had to struggle with too. And, trying to like be a little bit more open because I tend to be one of those, 150% one way, and so I have to be kind of careful.
Oh, you mean you're like all or nothing?
Yeah.
You're like an addict. Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I get it. I've been there. I'm still there.
Oh, yeah. And I think after going through the sugar training and, doing some of the HMS and other stuff that I've done here lately, it really kind of opens my eyes to the fact that I was dang lucky. I really was lucky in the sense that I went probably 50 years being an addict. Okay. I was probably little when this happened, and I know at least by the age of 10, and I'm 55 now. And I got a grip on it without understanding. I got a grip on it about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 2017, whatever, the March of 2017 is when I started going keto, and I eliminated all the sugar and those grains and stuff. And by doing that, it allowed me to kind of, be able to move on with my life. And I attributed it just to the diet, which that is extremely helpful. Absolutely 100%. And carnivore is even better in my opinion, but for that issue. But I never really looked at it as, an addiction issue. Not really. I mean, yeah, I teased and said, oh, I was a chocoholic. Okay, blah, 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 whatever, a breadaholic, whatever. But I never really looked at it as an addiction. I just, and now that I see that, I'm like, oh, good Lord, I have to be careful, because I thought I could, have like something for a special, a very limited time. And I have crazy willpower, so that's probably not an issue with me. But is it the one other bite that I have, or one more drink of whatever it is that going to be my tipping point? Now I'm like aware that I have probably been really lucky that, maybe if I would have taken it one step farther, I'd be right back where I used to be. And so that's kind of a scary thought.
Right. So yeah, but as addicts, we love living on the edge anyway. But
Ooh.
I agree. I agree 100%. It's and I think a lot of people, I don't think they understand it.
Mm-mm.
Whether it's, and the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking is what the sugar does really is it kills guilt and shame. And it just does. It's just like, okay, oh, I get it now. Like, this is why I did this, and that. This is why I picked out that bag of chips from the trash and had even the crumbles of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I hid wrappers. This is why I stole money from my parents. This is why, and it's just like, it was your brain. It was just your need to survive, right? The addict uses as if their survival depends on the drug. Listen to this. This is crazy. And I share this all the time on podcasts. If you take someone, like if you take a hardcore drug addict, like whatever, let's just assume they're a heroin addict. And they're sick. They're dope sick. Like they're nauseous. They're shaking. They're trembling. They're really sick. And you tell, and they call their dealer and they go to pick up drugs. Like they haven't taken drugs yet. They're not even there yet. Their withdrawal's gone. They know it's coming. The brain is already higher than it will be with the drug, because the drugs don't really even work anymore. They just remove the side effects of withdrawal, because addicts get to that point where the sugar doesn't work, the heroin doesn't work, the alcohol doesn't work, And so that's the power of the brain. So why not tap into that in a beneficial way instead of into a harmful way? And that's what the brain training is all about. It's about, reframing your mind on things like acceptance and crushing denial and all that's, because all this stuff, I think those are superpowers, right? Like Bitten says.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the brain's ability to adapt, and that's just shown by the fact that they're already high without the drug. That stands to me to believe that you can be a happy, contented, and fulfilled person without the drug. It was never the drug. You have it. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's really powerful.
Yeah, I love how that's put, because I do think that, when you hear that word addict, you're like, oh my God, there's something severely wrong with me. I'm this horrible person. But it's not that. It's your brain. It's like you didn't ask for that. Okay, yeah, you put the food in your mouth or the drink or whatever, drug, but what happens to your brain after that? That's not your fault. That is nothing you can control. That is beyond your control.
And I think that when we describe to people the brain in like the three parts, the brain has a ton of parts, but like the three main parts that I use to describe addiction is like you have your brain stem. It connects your spinal column to your brain, right? It's like, if you don't have that part of your brain, you're screwed. I mean, you're dead, right? It's like your respiratory rate, your blood pressure, your body temperature, like core essential functioning is just to sustain life, just to keep you alive. Like, so if that area of the brain is cooked, you're on a ventilator. Like you can't survive, right? So then you have the limbic system, which is where our reward center lives. And that's responsible for like emotional regulation, like things from fear, drives for sleep and sex. And it's basically drives. And that's where our reward center is. And that's where our addiction lives. And then we have this fantastic human brain called the prefrontal cortex, right? And like, if you've ever tried to train a dog, you know that they don't have one. They don't have a prefrontal cortex. They can't reason. They can't tell jokes. They can manipulate environments and people, but that's the addict brain, and that's in the limbic system. So that's why I'm on my way to the store. Well, my frontal cortex, my like superpowered human brain is being like, Dave, bad idea. Don't go to the store. Every time you've ever gone to the store and gotten drug foods, bad things have happened. But it doesn't matter, because a more primal, a simpler part of my brain, the drive oriented part of my brain is like, you need a drug right now or else you're going to die. And so I drug, right? As an addict, that's what happens. So, but to realize what's going on, that you're using against your will, that you were talking a lot about willpower, that willpower has nothing to do with it. Like,
I was about to bring that up.
Willpower is like, right, because it's this part of the brain. You can't even tap into it because it's so hooked on the substance and the reward center it needs its hit. As my mom would say, you need your nummies. You know, like you're just like, you're feeling the feels and you don't know what to do. So you got to numb out. And you know how to numb out. Ever since you were a little kid, you just picked up an Oreo. You mentioned Oreos, right? Whatever it is to take you out of the moment that you're in. And so really interesting video with Eric Clapton. He did a video with, he was being interviewed, I think by 60 Minutes. And they were like, heroin was your first drug. And he was like, God, no, it was sugar. And he was talking about how that's 5 years old. And he classifies a drug as anything that will change the way you think or feel. And now if we use that definition, think about all the drugs we have to face on a regular day-to-day basis. Social media, right? Your phone, food,
gaming, shopping.
They're all process addictions. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. It is mind blowing.
We beat her, and yet for some reason with the food, we just beat the hell out of ourselves. We believe that we should be able to manage this because it's just food. Here's the thing, guys. It's not just food. These are highly engineered food-like substances. These aren't food. Steak is a food. A Cheeto is not a food. It's made in a lab. It's designed to give you an experience. And look at the advertisements they use. They're not selling you a food. They're selling you a feeling, like the Coke commercials with the people smiling and the, you know, and the Go-Gurt and that's not food. That's brain hijacking. And so I think we have to take the stigma out of the food. And I think that's the way to do it, and to realize that what we're really up against. This is neurochemical warfare. You know, this is not, it's not a this item or a that item. They know exactly how to elicit a surge of dopamine in your brain, and they know what will happen when you have that surge. They know that you'll want more. And
now they put it in the formulas for babies. Corn syrup. Yeah, the high fructose corn syrup.
And it's I really feel bad for people that can't breastfeed, because there are people that can't breastfeed.
I know.
And what kind of options I've heard of people mixing heavy cream and egg yolks.
Oh, wow.
But you know, there's not a lot of research on that. So what does a mom do?
Exactly.
They have like almost nowhere to turn.
No, they don't. And I've heard that now they're coming out with some new formulas, supposedly. I don't know. But my granddaughter just turned 3 and she was breastfed. But I kept her during the day once my daughter went back to teaching. And I tried to find formula. I'm talking, I researched it because I was all in the midst of, my health journey, right? And my coaching, etc. And I could not find it. I finally settled on a brand from Germany. They still had some of the sugar, I don't know, something in it, but they didn't have like the seed oils in it and a few other things. And so I went ahead and got that just in case. Thank goodness I never had to use it, and I ended up throwing it away. But the fact that I couldn't find a clean product, good gosh, that's a baby. I
wonder about I wonder if you just use like keto chow or something. I don't know how that
right
works.
I don't know.
I mean? But a lot of these products have other things in them, like sweeteners and things like that. So it's really interesting, and I think it's like I said, it's become so, like I say, normalized is normal. Lies. So it's like it's become such a social norm that it's normal, but it's really not normal. It's not normal to eat Cheetos. It's become normalized to eat Cheetos, and there's a big difference.
But if you don't eat it, then you've got issues, because you should not restrict any food. But here's the key word: food.
Right. And they're asking you to restrict the non-foods, right?
Yeah.
Harmful substances, disease-causing agents. It's another way of looking at it.
Exactly. It's just boggling to me. And because it's so clear, like, when I started getting into all the health, information and stuff, nutrition, and all that, before I even got into the addiction part of it, it's just crazy what's out there. And then how people react to it, because it's like people are drug pushers when it comes to
Oh
food.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Good
yeah.
God. I mean, you're treated like you're this weirdo, this crazy person because you won't eat crap. It
Right,
makes
and
no
it
sense.
makes social situations really challenging. Yeah,
It does. Even
yeah.
within a family, it's
Oh yeah.
like,
Oh, absolutely within the family. I mean, I think about like Thanksgiving. It's just
yeah.
people are like, I've been doing what I've been doing for like 5 years, and people are like, oh, you're still on that diet? It's like so the word diet used to mean what we eat, what we
Exactly.
ate. Now it
Hmm.
means what we don't eat. You know what I mean? It's so funny because like a lion's diet was gazelle, right? Like a hippo's diet was like small plants and vegetation. A cow's diet is grass. But for a human, the word diet means exactly what we restrict. So it's like, no, it's just different. We get to a point where it's framed differently, and it's just part of who I am. It's just how I eat.
Exactly. And it's crazy to me that somebody would push something that can hurt you, like literally hurt
Right.
you.
What's the deal with that? What's the deal with that?
It,
Why it's
it,
like,
my eyes are so open that when I see this and I hear this, I'm just like, why would you want me to
why is this
ingest
love?
something? Like, would you tell me to eat arsenic? It's just a
It's
little bit's
like,
not going to hurt you. I mean,
I think it's like, they don't, they're after making someone feel different. Like they're after,
mhm,
like I was talking about, like the
yeah.
experience. So I think it's really harmful. And if you ask my mom what her favorite thing to do is, my mom's an addict in recovery, right? She's like, to feed people. And like, we realize how like messed up that really is, like,
Yeah,
because what do we want? We're trying to like satisfy other people's wants and needs. And it's like so codependent. And when the new term that we're starting to use is compulsive helper, so because I think codependency is so misunderstood. But people get what it is to like help compulsively. But I think it's true.
yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
huge problem. And I think about my grandma sitting in her nursing home in her wheelchair, blind, from the way that she treated her body her whole life,
Mhm.
like waiting for the fried clams to come from Simcoe on the bridge from Boston, just like, where are they? Are they here yet? Just like, no, that was active addiction. That was active addiction. That wasn't cute at all. That was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I do find that so sad. And I admit that I used to do that
Oh,
because
absolutely.
I got pleasure out of making foods that gave pleasure to my family. And, even some things that I thought were healthy that now I understand are not. Um, but I did that because I like to see that look on your face of
Oh
pure
yeah,
pleasure,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
and now because I view food so differently, and it's not that I don't enjoy my food, it's not that you know I'm not into the cooking like I used to be because I understand food is your fuel. Yes, enjoy it, absolutely, but it's not this big production that I used to do, where everything, I had to have all the colors of the rainbow on the plate, and all that good
it was
stuff.
insanity.
Yeah. And I would
It was
spend like
absolute insanity.
3 hours in the kitchen a night cooking and, making everything nice. And then the cleaning up. And to me, I'm like, that is ridiculous. I mean, if that's what you like to do and that's your hobby or something, okay, whatever. But I got stuff to do. I don't have
Right,
time to be
right,
up in the
right.
kitchen, making this woo food that's going to trigger your brain and cause whatever else going on. Just make a simple steak and eat it and be done. Let's go. It's like it's
Let's get on with
liberating
it.
to
Yeah.
me. It's liberating. Is that not liberating to you now?
It's
It's
freeing,
like,
it's funny because
yes.
I was a former artisan bread baker. So I was like handing out bread
Oh.
to people. I like had a bread blog. I had 3 starters in my fridge. They all had first names. Like it was nuts. It was not healthy. Like, and to realize that I was just like handing out disease loaves, like These
Whoa.
are microbiome destroying, these are brain chemicals, and I just didn't know what I was doing. And so I got some information, and I was still baking because it was still a hobby, even though I wasn't eating it. And I realized, like, this is stupid. This is crazy. This is insanity.
I used to be a cake decorator. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're right there. We're right there together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, it's nuts. Right?
For sure. Okay, let's talk. We're pretty much, getting down to time, but for those people who are kind of struggling with, am I really a food addict or not? Can you just talk about some signs that could indicate you may have an addiction problem?
Sure. If you try to stop and you can't, that's one. I think the other thing is, like, do you react differently to people depending on what you had for dinner? Like, does it change the way that you respond to stress or stimuli? Right? Are you more irritable after you ate something than you were before? I think really is my favorite is, can you stop and can you stay stopped? Because lots of people can stop, but they can't stay stopped. I think there's a screening tool that I adapted with Bitten Johnson called the SUGARx. That is a 6-question yes or no. It's a screen. It's not an assessment. It's just a screen. So it kind of tells us, like, if you have 2 or more positive answers, it's time to do some more digging and some more research. And like you mentioned, the sugar, that would be a really good first thing to start with. I think I'm trying to think. I think, do you eat something that will cause you guilt and you eat it anyway? Do you eat something and you debate whether you should or shouldn't eat something and you eat it anyway? Like, these are things that addicts do. Do you long for something? Do you
24/7
hide it? Right.
Hot.
Do you romance it? Right. That's another thing. We say those guilt, debate, and romance. Those are really big ones. And do you eat despite consequences? That could be in your relationships. It could be in your body. It could be your health. It could be the way you feel. It could be your mood. I think a lot of that ties in really nicely with the concept of addiction.
Also, I think, and this is something I used to say, I can't live without blank food. Banana, chocolate, bread, pasta, rice. I used to say all of that. Oh, I could not live without that. My life wouldn't be worth living if I couldn't have that.
I've heard that. Oh, yeah.
Red flag.
I'd rather be dead than give up carbohydrates. I've heard that from a family member.
Red flag.
Right. Right. Because there's more to life than your food.
Oh my goodness. So much more. And when you don't have to think about the food freaking 24/7, it's amazing what other things you can occupy your time with. You're not in the kitchen preparing the food or looking at recipes or watching food programming. Good God, I used to do all that. Holy cow, the Food Network. It was on no time for all day long. That was on.
I remember my friend Danny said to me, he's like, remember when you didn't have kids, Dave? What did you do with your time? And it was just like, it's true. Like, I don't even remember what it was like. And I don't remember what it was like as an active addict. I just forget. Because it was constant. It was constant. The next thing, the next thing that'll make me okay, even though the first thing never made me okay. It was just like, you're chasing the same, and you can't replicate your first high. It's the brain. It's not possible. So you'll be chasing that high the rest of your life. And you
that is so true. That is so true. And like when you eat something in that first hit, it's like, yeah. But then after you do it so many times, and then you have to keep eating more and more of it, or changing addictions. That and now I understand that's what I did. Yeah. Oh, like, God, yes.
Playing games while I'm watching TV.
Right. Right.
Done that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I've been there, done that.
On the Titanic.
Yeah. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. And then when you look back, you're like, oh, God. And more is coming to light. The more I learn, the more I think about things, the more I was like, well,
Just
that
peeling back the
explains
layers.
that. That explains that. Oh
Right.
my goodness. And y'all, it's liberating. It is. It does kind of punch you in the gut, and you kind of maybe even go through a little bit of denial. But once you accept it, then you understand. It's just like when you finally get a diagnosis, when you've had all these symptoms and you're just going crazy and you keep going to the doctor and they keep going, everything looks normal, and then send you on your way when you know there's something wrong. And then finally a doctor will go, I know what it is. Bam, here's your diagnosis. Now we know how to treat this.
Right. And that ties in with the whole eating disorder problem, right? Because you're not treating the right thing. And I'm sure eating disorders do exist. And I'm not here to tell you that they don't. I just don't work with them. I just have no desire to.
Yeah.
I don't want to teach anyone how to moderate. It's just,
I'm that way too. Yeah.
My two partners, no, we have no desire to try to work with harmful users. We have none. Not even
That sounds like bitten. I've heard you say that so many times, but you know what? I understand it now. I get it now because now I'm like that. So I get it. Okay. So, one last question for you.
Go ahead.
If somebody pretty well after listening to all this kind of red light, okay, you know what? I'm a food addict. I don't even need to be diagnosed. I get it now. What can they do if they can't go and get professional help or, go through one of your programs or whatever? What are some steps they can take to start the process, at least to help them?
Sure. So there's a couple things that we actually do right now that are totally free and public access. One of them is I run a group on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern time. So that's 3 p.m. Central time. And no, that's where you're at. And every week, every Thursday ever since COVID started, honestly, because I was kicked out. I went to Low Carb Denver. I got kicked out of work for 2 weeks and I started this group and it's been going ever since then.
Wow.
So it's a great place to get community, get access. The three of us are there. We run the group. We do coaching. Sometimes we bring in speakers, like we bring in some really cool people. Like I know Eric Westman's coming soon. We have Nicole Avina's coming next week. So we bring in like leaders in the space. So that you can get access to that. We also facilitate the clubhouse room with John Unwin, which is called The Fork in the Road. So that's Wednesdays. That's 1 p.m. Eastern or noon Central time. And then the other thing is if you go to SUGARxGlobal.com, you can actually download our free ebook called Crush Your Cravings. Okay. It's a checklist and it gives you tons of resources. There's tons of links in there or send you to videos, to all sorts of things from the Eric Clapton clip I referenced, a couple of Robert Lustig videos, like resources on seed oils. I mean, like everything that we think you honestly need to get started is right there. Awesome. And so I think that's a really good launching point. And if you never work with us again, we just want you to have this information because we think it's invaluable. The other thing is the 12-step movement is massive and it is free. It doesn't require anything of you financially. They are going to ask you to work on yourself, but other than that, they will give you help just out of the love and grace in their heart for having found a solution and they want to share that solution with you. So that's definitely another option. It's not for everybody. And there are other options too, like Smart Recovery is an option. And a lot of my colleagues run free groups too. And Sugar Bomb in Your Brain is a good place to get access to on Facebook, get access to some of this information. Vera Retirement also has one. I think it's called You're Sweet Enough Without Sugar or something. And her book, Food Junkies, is fantastic.
Oh, love that.
And I wrote a book with Cynthia Myers-Morrison called The Fix for Cravings, which kind of takes people through a process of changing their life. And food is just sort of one example of that. So there's tons of resources out there. And if you'd like to get on a call with me, I'd be happy to, even if you can't afford anything. I just want to direct you to someone that can help you, whether that's connecting you with the right 12-step program based on kind of what your needs are and what your wants are, or connecting with some of my colleagues that might work one-on-one or whatever it is. We're here to really help. I mean, we've been freed from a massive burden. And we say it's our privilege and our purpose to be able to serve. And we really believe that. And so we just want to help.
I feel you. That's awesome. I will put all of Dave's information below, so no worries. And Thank you so much, Dave, for coming on. And hey, while y'all are here, subscribe to my channel. Go follow Dave. Again, I will have it all below, so no worries. And thank you so much. I have really enjoyed this
My
more than
pleasure.
an hour.
Thanks for doing what you do.
Absolutely. We got to
Our
keep
community needs
powering on. Thanks, Dave.